Bella Pevsner, 89, at home in Brooklyn. As a teenager, she fled her home country of Belarus after the Nazis invaded it. Sasha Maslov for the New York Times. Hard work is the key to longevity, says Bella Pevsner, 89. I worked hard all my life, she said. That's why I stay here so long. So it's good to work a lot. A hard operation in 2002 halted a once irrepressible work ethic. I retired at the age of 74, Mrs. Pevsner said recently. If not for the operation, maybe I'd work more. I was a workaholic. What can I tell you? That dogged determination to keep going is rooted in her formative years. As a teenager, she fled her home country of Belarus in 1941 after the Nazis invaded it. Her parents and a sister escaped, but many other relatives, among them Mrs. Pevsner's grandparents and a younger sister, were slaughtered. After a harrowing 300-mile journey, the family found sanctuary in Kazakhstan. Food and resources were scarce for years. She recalled walking barefoot through snow. Her father, a tailor, fashioned clothing out of flour sacks for the family. We stayed here and there, Mrs. Pevsner said. It was a hard life. After the war, the family settled in Ukraine, where they lived in a small basement apartment. They slept on iron beds, using rags as mattress padding. For years, Mrs. Pevsner had just one set of garments: underwear, slippers and a cherry-colored dress with white dots. I washed every day, and I went to work every day in the same clothes, she said. Mrs. Pevsner worked as a bookkeeper. In 1953, a matchmaker introduced her to the man she would marry. A year later, their son was born. Shortly after her mother died, Mrs. Pevsner, then 50, immigrated to the United States with her husband and her son. She did not know a word of English, but wasted no time learning it. It was hard for me to learn from the dictionary, so I learned from speaking, Mrs. Pevsner said. In Brooklyn, when I walked down the streets, and Jewish people met me and talked to me in Yiddish, I told them no, this is my own language. I will never forget. I need to speak English. Speak to me in English. I was very insistent. Mrs. Pevsner in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Sasha Maslov for the New York Times. Mrs. Pevsner continued to work into her 70s for various employers, as a bookkeeper and an accountant, which she credits for exercising her mind and keeping her sharp. She recalled one job at a bakery where a boss threatened to fire her if she did not use a calculator to compute the discounts offered to regular customers. I figured everything out in my head, Mrs. Pevsner said. My head was good. It's still not bad today, Mrs. Pevsner says she feels lucky that her 63-year-old son lives in an apartment across the street from her home in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Her husband died of liver cancer in 2011, and age has taken a toll on her health. She has diabetes, sleep apnea, hypertension, gout, respiratory illness, thyroid problems and retinal disease. I have a lot of sickness. Better to tell you what I don't have, Mrs. Pevsner said. It's hard, very hard, but I manage it. I try my best. Artwork by Mrs. Pevsner, who took up painting at age 80. Many of her creations hang in frames on her walls. Sasha Maslov for the New York Times. In 2014, the Jewish Association Serving the Aging, also known as JASA, a beneficiary agency of UJA-Federation of New York, began delivering Mrs. Pevsner kosher meals. UJA-Federation of New York is one of the 8 organizations supported by the New York Times Neediest Cases Fund. Mrs. Pevsner receives $1,232 a month in Social Security income. In April, the association used $75 from the fund so Mrs. Pevsner could buy fruit to bake dishes for a Passover meal. The money also went toward buying special eye drops to treat her retinal disease. An additional $46 was used in August to provide Mrs. Pevsner with a shower bench. Retirement has allowed her to discover new interests. She took up painting at age 80 during a visit to a center for older adults. Much of her art features animals and landscapes, and many of her creations hang in frames on her walls. Other paintings remain unfinished. Her failing eyesight has delayed their completion. Mrs. Pevsner says she expects to continue thriving despite her many maladies. Her father lived to be 97, and she is determined to live until at least 100. There is still much to be done, she explained. I don't lose hope, Mrs. Pevsner said. I have pictures not finished, so I need to finish. A version of this article appears in print on November 13, 2017, on page 820 of the New York edition with the headline Her Secret to Long Life Work. Lots of it.